Institute for Reforming Government. Jake Curtis, I never asked you. Where in Wisconsin did you grow up, Jake?
Milwaukee area.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm a Milwaukee area guy. Now I'm in Ozaki County. So,
All right. So well, kind of staying in the WOW area, or you've moved into the WOW area, I guess, right?
yeah, we've been in Ozaki County for 15 years now, and definitely changing. Wow County numbers are not what they used to be, and so that's why, frankly, I guess to bring it back into kind of the political realm, outstate is so critical because the numbers that even just 10, 15 years ago we could have expected out of the WOW counties, it's just not what it used to be. And so now voters in central Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin, western Wisconsin, the Bow counties, right, the Fox Valley, those are critical. Love Ozaki County, but it's just not what it used to be. When we moved up here, it was about 67%. Really pretty reliable conservative voters, and we saw that throughout the Walker recount in 2014. Really strong numbers out of Ozaki. Judge Schimmel got 51% of the vote in April. It's just, yeah, it's basically a swing county. Still beautiful, but the politics have changed.
I love Ozaki. My husband grew up in Cedarburg, and I mean, years of going to visit his parents, and just it's such a cool. I mean, just Ozaki County was reliably red. I mean, I remember. I mean, I wasn't there for it, but I remember. Um, I believe when not like I was thrilled about it, or I'm thrilled in reflecting, but John McCain was in Cedarburg campaigning during
The
the
chocolate factory,
yeah.
yep, right downtown. I was there.
Yes. Oh, you were? Okay. And I
I
love
was.
me a chocolate factory sub, and I also like who doesn't like their sundaes, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So, you had a brief hiatus last week. Glad that you're back joining me on the show, but had an opportunity to talk with one of your colleagues, Daniel Sir, an attorney, and we did discuss the Milwaukee County Judge Hannah Dugan issue, but wanted to dive in to that a little bit more in depth, and I mean, I guess the repercussions of that, and the strong message it sends other judges, not only here in Wisconsin but around the country.
Yeah, and thanks for having Daniel on last week. He's obviously we're really lucky to have him as a fellow, and hoping that he is actually going to be able to do more with us throughout this year as we ramp up our Court Watch program or project. And you and I have talked about that project. Unfortunately, it's probably more important now after the results from April. If Judge Schimmel had won, it still would have been important, and we're going to hold everybody accountable. But I think it's fair to say there would have been just a lot more confidence in the decisions coming out of a conservative majority, and obviously, again, we would have still followed it closely and been objective. But I think it's fair to say now that our project, the Court Watch project at IRG, is going to be even more critical because I just don't have a lot of confidence right now in this majority. We spent all spring, because again, the political campaigns, they're going to do what they're going to do. What we really focused on, what are some of the really bad precedent going back 20 years ago that the conservative majority that we had for 15 years, what did they fix? And now, unfortunately, right, things are coming full circle. We're going back to at least a permanent progressive majority for the next 3 years. So what are some of the landmines that we're going to have to navigate? What are some of the big decisions that we could see coming down the pike, so to speak? And that's what our project is going to do going forward, because now it's even more critical with this majority. And so we're going to have a really good team to do that going forward, and we're going to continue to put out primers. We think that's really valuable. So much of this gets into the weeds, and it's maybe not necessary to have a law degree, but it's certainly helpful to have somebody with a legal background. And frankly, we have a majority of individuals at IRG with law degrees, and several of us obviously have practiced for a number of years. And so what our goal is going to be is to break down these decisions in a way that people can understand. And you don't have to have a legal background, because it's not about intelligence. It's just about having that legal acumen. But everybody knows how these decisions impact their lives, or how they have the potential to impact their lives. So that's what we're going to try to do. But then, coming back to the Judge Dugan situation, we're also going to talk about the administration side of the judiciary. People, I think, forget or don't realize that, right, the judicial branch, it's a branch of government. So just like the executive branch has a whole, right, infrastructure of personnel and rules and regulations, obviously the same with the legislature, right? There's the Legislative Reference Bureau. There's these bureaus. I think there's a technology or information bureau that kind of helps with the technological side, right? These branches of government, they're separate branches of government, and they're also organizations, just like any company or nonprofit, right? They have personnel, they have rules, regulations, IT needs, records management. And one of the things we're gonna focus on at IRG, in addition to the case law, is how is the third branch, right? How is the judicial branch actually running, and are there procedures or rules that can be improved? And nobody really thinks about that. But as we're seeing right now in real time with Judge Dugan, the rules that actually apply to the judicial branch are really critical for situations like this. And so I'm sure most of your listeners remember, but we had Judge Dugan out of Milwaukee County, allegedly, right? It's alleged, and she's obviously has the right to due process, but it's alleged that she essentially assisted a defendant that was in her courtroom avoid ICE detection that was in the halls of the Milwaukee County Courthouse. I've actually served as a special appointed assistant district attorney in Milwaukee County for a short period earlier in my career, but I spent basically 3 months in the Milwaukee County Courthouse. And anybody's been there, and frankly, in most courthouses in the state, but in particular in the Milwaukee County Courthouse, if you've been there, there's huge, like, cavernous halls that separate the courtrooms. I mean, these are huge halls with benches. In other words, it's a very public place. And so I think what is kind of particularly interesting here is kind of the initial reaction, allegedly, from Judge Dugan, that she was essentially trying to take the position that these ICE agents weren't really allowed in the courthouse. That is an absurd thing to say. Again, if you know anything about the Milwaukee County Courthouse, is the hallways, especially on the first floor, right? I mean, they're big marble open hallways. I mean, they're very much public ways. And so to say that these ICE agents couldn't be present in the courthouse is absurd on its face. But then, more problematically is it's alleged that she essentially assisted the defendant in her courtroom, and his counsel tried to flee apprehension by ICE. And so it's very problematic. And so getting to the administration side, right, when this happens, essentially a judge is suspended from the ability to serve as a judge. And what our primer, I think, is going to be very helpful. It points out two things, or several things. First of all, two examples where this specifically has happened. So in March 2021, there was a situation, again, out of Milwaukee County Circuit Court. It was a Judge Brett Bloom. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name, but he was charged with state felony possession of child pornography. And so, and I'm reading from a decision here. On the same day the state filed the criminal complaint, the Wisconsin Supreme Court issued an order temporarily prohibiting Attorney Bloom from exercising the powers of a circuit court judge and temporarily withholding his judicial salary. So that's from 2022. So a very recent example, and that was a judge charged with a state felony. Here we're obviously, in the case of Judge Dugan, talking about a federal felony. But then there was one going even further back, another situation several decades before the 2022 example. A judge on the Iron County Circuit Court was facing federal felony charges related to interstate prostitution and lying to a grand jury. So in that case from 1981, that actually was involving a federal felony charge. And so there, and I'm again reading from this disciplinary decision, the Supreme Court stated it prohibited Judge Ranieri from exercising the powers of a circuit court judge in Wisconsin pending final determination of the proceedings or further order of the court, and ordered his judicial salary withheld until further order of the court. So again, we have two examples, one from 1981, one from 2022, where this statute essentially has been applied to pending charges. And again, one example state, one example federal. So to the extent anybody is trying to argue that this is unprecedented, that's not accurate at all. This is a very clear state statute that articulates a process for when charges are pending. It is a suspension. So right, she hasn't been permanently removed from the bench. That would happen if she's actually convicted. And I can pause there for your insight, Meg.
Well, and I mean, I guess what I am, I don't know. I guess it's refreshing to see that a strong message is sent to, well, someone who should know better. I mean, it's kind of like you have this certain image, or and I mean, it's all been shot, I guess, since these perpetual investigations of Donald Trump during the campaign, and even before that, about the rogue judges that are out there. And I guess this allegedly rogue judge in Milwaukee County. But it's disappointing, I guess, because as much as the rhetoric of saying, oh, there are two different tiers of justice, or there's lawfare. I mean, a lot of it, until you actually observe it or see it demonstrated in your own state, and often in your own community, like up here in Wausau, you just don't. It doesn't seem as real, and you just don't want to believe it. But it's right there, and Judge Hannah Dugan allegedly is doing what we suspected or believed was in the hearts of some of these judges in this country.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Meg. And I think it is disappointing. I mean, I don't think anybody. Well, I think you and I would be on the same page on this. This isn't a good development. You're absolutely right. We have seen this development of, I think most people now are describing it as lawfare. And, just, I guess, taking it kind of to an interesting direction. But remember, lawfare really had a lot of, I think, academics started applying that term in the context of what China has been doing, right, with intellectual property theft and any number of intellectual property actions that the CCP has taken against the United States, and they kind of have applied that term in that context because it is in many senses an act of war, right? It's obviously not kinetic, but it's an act that undermines the economic stability of a country. And so here, when you look at it in a political sense, it very much is certainly a political act of war. And I think, frankly, as Wisconsinites, as Americans, I'm hopeful that I think both sides can see that we don't want to continue to go down this path of just constant litigation warfare. And so, in a situation like this, when you have judges essentially taking the law into their own hands, right? These were federal agents who had warrants and were simply trying to carry out their duties. When you have a judge, and yes, allegedly, but I would encourage people to read the federal indictment. It's pretty damning. She's presumed to her day in court, and she'll get that. But if in fact she did do what's alleged, I mean that's a really troubling development that you have a judge who is willing to essentially attempt to interfere with the federal execution of a warrant. And the problem is, and this is why, again, coming back to what we're going to be focusing on, among other things at IRG, is the actual administration of the courts. Again, they're an organization with hierarchy and personnel, just like any other organization, just like the executive branch, just like the legislative branch. And I think you and I were talking earlier, when this happened, there was a kind of a trickle-down effect where I believe, was it Sawyer County, a judge basically, indicated that she was going to follow the lead of Judge Dugan. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but right. So, in other words, there are repercussions to these sorts of deliberate acts, and so that's why it's important we have rules and procedures that apply to an organization. They're consistently applied, and when something like this happens, I think a message needs to be clearly articulated that this sort of continued behavior is going to be problematic. And when you talk about the criminal context, right? What's the point of actually charging somebody and ultimately, if they're convicted, sentencing them? I mean, there is a deterrent factor. And so here, remember, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but if Judge Dugan were to plead guilty to a felony or is found guilty of a felony, her office as a judge is automatically vacated under Wisconsin Statute Chapter 17. So, and now the Wisconsin Supreme Court would then have to take a separate step concerning her ability to practice law, but at least with respect to her ability to continue serving as a judge. So again, right now she's temporarily suspended. If she were convicted of a felony or pled guilty to a felony, she's automatically terminated as a judge under Wisconsin Chapter 17. And so, again, if there's a deterrent factor, if you're a judge who is contemplating interfering with a legal execution of a federal search warrant or whatever the case may be, like, there are repercussions to that. And I think it's important that we maintain, if we want to have any way forward out of this continual lawfare, I think we need members of both parties, both sides of the political aisle, to take a breath, take a step back, and realize, like, we're going to objectively apply the law, and we're not going to do so with respect to political favoritism. And I'm hoping we can kind of do a reset, because the path we're on is not a good one right now.
Well, Jake, and I heard from a retired Milwaukee cop that tunes in that stated that in his experience, Judge Hannah Dugan usually favored the defendants over the prosecution, and it was very frustrating for Milwaukee cops that had to, after conducting these investigations and really making their attempt to enforce the law, would have to continually have to deal with judges, allegedly judges like Judge Hannah Dugan.
Yeah, well, and that's always a frustration. Now look, it's important that that every defendant is entitled to due process. The state, obviously, in a criminal context, bears the burden to prove the elements of an offense beyond a reasonable doubt, and I think that's important, right? It's the foundational principle of this country, that the state has the burden. If they don't have the evidence to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt, then they shouldn't be convicted. That being said, I understand why, certainly from a law enforcement standpoint, it would be very frustrating that if they put in, when they put in a lot of time and effort to gather the necessary evidence, and criminal charges are filed, when judges are essentially looking to find ways to allow defendants, whether it's low bail, light sentencing. I mean, it's obvious why that would be extremely frustrating for law enforcement, who are spending, blood, sweat, and tears, making sure that these there's sufficient evidence so that prosecutors can then do their job to convict. And frankly, I would not limit this to law enforcement. Uh, there are certainly some, I think, prosecutors that may err on the side of, ironically, kind of more leniency to defendants, but not all of them, and a lot of them put in a significant amount of work as well. And so yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate when that happens, because a lot of time and effort goes into these. But again, I mean, this is the irony. Defendants are absolutely entitled to due process, and Judge Dugan is going to get that in this situation. But I think it's really, again, I think it's important that other judges in the state realize that they have a very special responsibility. I mean, they're not above the law, and it's certainly been interesting comments. You go on social media, and if you look at some of these articles relating to Judge Dugan, kind of interesting takes from both the right and the left. Again, to our friends on the right that just kind of don't want to kind of I guess recognize those due process rights. I'm not willing to go down that path. Right? That there's a reason that we have that foundation in this country. Right? If you look back to the founding generation, there's a reason those gentlemen fought so aggressively for things like due process, because we didn't have that under the thumb of England. And so, I mean, these are very foundational principles, foundational to really the formation of this country. So due process is important. On the other hand, when the left wants to kind of minimize her actions, or the alleged actions, right, or almost want to take the position that somehow, and I've seen some absurd takes, that these judges are really the final arbiters and therefore are above the law. That is also very dangerous, right? Particularly when we're talking about the actual conduct of the judge, him or herself. They may be in a specific case the final arbiter as far as the interpretation, although, right, obviously a circuit court judge, those decisions are then can be appealed, but certainly their own conduct, they are not the final arbiter of their own conduct. And so they are still subject to the laws of the state and of this country. And so, again, I'm just hopeful that we can do a reset. She will have her day in court. There's actually an article, I think, yesterday in the Wall Street Journal. She's going to have very good counsel. Ironically, a conservative lawyer, Paul Clement, one of really the most well-known conservative lawyers in the country, has signed on to her defense. So she's going to have her day in court. But I'm hopeful, particularly the judicial branch, just breath. The federal government will act when it has the authority to do so, pursuant to warrants, and judges really don't have a right to interfere with that. But they also have the right to run their courtrooms and consistent with state law and with applicable regulations and rules, and I'm hopeful they'll do that.
Jay Curtis, one last question. We're over time, but I have to ask. Were you surprised by the unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, or at least the Supreme Court, to act as swiftly as they did to suspend Judge Hannah Dugan's ability to be a judge?
Oh, great question, and we actually answered that in our primer, which again hopefully will go out today or tomorrow. But no, I guess I'm not surprised, because if you look at the criminal complaint here, right, this is not a flimsy complaint. This is supported by numerous witnesses, well documented, and when you look at the allegations, and then you look at the actual standard, whereby any judge charged is going to be temporarily suspended, and then you look at the precedent, like we talked about earlier, right? There's clear precedent, one from just 3 years ago. This is kind of the process that has to be followed. So it would have been, I haven't had many good things to say about the current progressive majority, but credit where credit is due. They did the right thing in this situation, followed the standard, followed the precedent, and suspended her as a judge temporarily during the pendency of her case. So they did the right thing here. And I guess I wasn't surprised, because it's so obvious that this was something that had to be done.
They couldn't help themselves, or I mean, I'm always sort of cynical, kind of like, oh, why did they do this? I mean, is it like saving face? Is it covering? I don't know. It seems. I mean,
Well,
even it was even egregious to the four lefties.
yeah. Well, so the example from 2022 that I cited, that was a very progressive judge out of Milwaukee County, and obviously a horrible situation involving child images, and so there, right, the court. Now that would have been, I guess, a conservative majority at that point, so they did the right thing. But look, I mean, this gets to um, my earlier point. This is a court system that has their own rules and regulations, and they still have to monitor themselves. And so, thankfully, even this court knows in a situation like this, whether they agree or disagree, um, they made the right move. And we actually point out in our primer that there is some discretion. So, and that's why I think your question's a really good one, Meg. I mean, if they thought that this was a completely meritless complaint, filed for political purposes, there would have been a way that I think they could have avoided this suspension, but they didn't. And so you're absolutely right. The fact that this is a unanimous decision immediately issued leads me to believe that when these justices looked at this federal criminal complaint, they knew they know it has merit. And again, these are allegations. She'll have her day. Judge Dugan will have her day in court. But at least for now, applying kind of an initial analysis, there's merit here, and that resulted in the unanimous decision. So obviously, more to come on this. This is I think a very significant. I mean, obviously, this got national attention, but I think it got national attention. And this will be my final point, Meg. It got national attention because of just how I guess unique of a situation this was. Right, a sitting judge being arrested for allegedly interfering with the federal investigation. So, just from a political standpoint, it was this very kind of hot topic and made national news. And now it's kind of died down. But there's, as we're going to, I think, highlight in our primer, and we'll certainly be willing to continue to talk to you and others about, there's a lot of important principles at play here relating to the administration of the judicial system. And yeah, it's getting into the weeds, but I think people are realizing why it's so important. And so that's what we're going to continue to focus on. So definitely more to come on this story.
Jay Curtis, always a delight to chat with you. We never run out of topics to discuss, and I mean, maybe that's job security for the two of us. But
Yeah. Well,
I'd like a vacation every once in a while from this racket, right? Wouldn't you?
yeah, well, we got summer coming up. We've talked about, we're planning our Vilas County week, so we love the
Yes.
North Woods.
Yeah, well, you know what that means. You got to drive through Marathon to get to Vilas, so you're always welcome in the studio. So keep that in mind.
We will plan that. I
All
like
right,
it.
excellent. Yes, well, I just like a little lull in the action, but I don't think that it's expected for at least the next 400 years. Right?
Well, we'll have stuff to talk about. We
Yeah,
will
that's
have a
for
lot
sure.
to talk about, Meg.
Well, have a great day, Jake. I appreciate it as always, and it's reforminggovernment.org, right?
You got it. You
Excellent.
got
Hey,
it.
thank you so much. I'll talk with you again next week.
All right, talk to you.
Take care.
Thanks.